everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So today we're going to talk about America's involvement in World War II in the European theater. Now, disclaimer before we get started here, there's really two wars happening at the same time for America. The war in the Pacific and the war in Europe. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to teach everything that happened in the war in Europe today. And then tomorrow we will go back in time and start at the same point where we are right now, 1941. And we will talk about everything that happens in the Pacific. Because if you jump back and forth on what's happening in both wars, it can get confusing because they're very different strategies, very different enemies, and it's just an entirely different war altogether in Europe and the Pacific. So let's talk about how Hitler gets defeated. Let's get started. So let's start here talking about American combat in World War II in Europe. Now you're probably thinking, all right, so we just straight up invade Germany, and you're like, no. I know some stuff about World War II. This is where we invade France. Wasn't D-Day? Isn't that a thing that happens here? You're correct, and we're going to talk about that today. That is actually 3 years into the war, because D-Day is actually our plan B. We did not want to invade France, which was controlled by Germany, because that was almost like a death sentence. So we had a whole nother strategy we're going to start this war with on how we're going to defeat Hitler. All right, so that is called Operation Overlord. Sorry, I'm wrong. Operation Overlord is D-Day. Operation Torch. There's two operations here. Operation Torch is the one we're going to talk about first. That will be a failure. Then Operation Overlord is going to be the one in which America and the Allies are effectively able to get into Europe. So this guy here is Dwight Eisenhower. He is the Supreme Allied Commander, meaning George Marshall, who's the head general who stays in the United States, has sent Dwight Eisenhower to Europe to orchestrate how to beat Hitler, all right, and Mussolini. So he gets here, all the other countries basically put all their troops under the command of Dwight Eisenhower as well. So not only is he in charge of American troops, he's in charge of everybody else's troops as well. So Operation Torch is his brainchild. What he decides to do is, instead of invading Europe, and you can see Germany at the very top of the screen there, all right, Hitler is spreading out in Africa to take over natural resources. So America wants to stop Germany spread into Africa first, then work their way through Italy, take out Mussolini, and then, because Italy's right there next to Germany, just march right on into Germany. That is the plan on Operation Torch. The biggest concern, honestly, for Operation Torch at the beginning is this dude. This is Erwin Rommel. Erwin Rommel is nicknamed the Desert Fox in Germany. He is a fantastic tank commander, and he is in North Africa wrecking shop. So he is our biggest concern on how are we going to be able to defeat him. But we have two very good tank generals ourselves, we find out. A guy named Omar Bradley and a guy named George Patton. Long story short, cutting out all the cool parts. But America, our first place we invade is North Africa. We do fight Erwin Rommel, and Omar Bradley and George Patton are able to defeat the Desert Fox here and secure North Africa. This is a huge loss for Germany because they don't have the natural resources. So phase 1, secure North Africa, complete. Phase 2 at this point is to invade Italy. Now, America is super concerned about how strong Italy's military is because we've been convinced they're super dominant. But we're going to invade Italy anyway. We're actually going to reference this story here again in a couple minutes. But America invades Italy. There's some very vicious fighting that happens initially. And then we realize that Mussolini's a big fat liar, and he doesn't have nearly the military that he said he did. And the entire Mussolini regime collapses almost immediately. So Mussolini tries to escape to his buddy's place in Germany. He tries to leave Italy and get to Germany because he realizes, oh no, I want to get captured. The Italian people themselves are so angry at Mussolini for having lied to them because he had convinced them that they were this awesome group, that the Italian people capture Mussolini and some of his top people. They kill them, drag them back to Rome, the capital of Italy, and hang their dead bodies up from a gas station here where everybody comes out to look at the dead body of Mussolini. Mussolini had been in power for 20 years, and people loved him until they realized he's a big fat liar here when America invades, and very quickly turn against him. So Italy, here in orange, this is going great. All right, so we took over North Africa, we've taken over Italy, hooray. So now all we have to do is march directly from Italy into Germany. So the country at the bottom of Germany here in this map, that's actually Austria. That has already been taken over by Germany, so technically they touch. So hooray, so we get up to the top of Italy and we realize we made a mistake. Now, we're not completely stupid. We knew that there were mountains at the top of Italy because we had seen maps. This is, we knew the Italian Alps were there. We run everything with tanks and all that, so we got to get over the Alps. So we're like, we'll just go over them somehow. So the problem is that on a map, it just looks like little colorful areas. In person, this is what the Italian Alps look like. You're not getting over those in tanks in 1943. When we realized that we can't actually get into Germany from Italy due to the Italian Alps, we have to go to what our plan B is, which is going to have to be to invade France, which we do not want to do, but we're going to have to. So Operation Torch is technically considered a failure because we don't end the war with it. Even though we never actually lost a battle in Operation Torch, it is considered a failure because we were not able to go into Germany through Italy. So the question here is explain why America and the Allies were unable to invade Germany through Italy at the end of Operation Torch. So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So while we're regrouping here, it's a good time to talk about some of the other groups in World War II and how they really changes American society or hopes to. Probably the most famous story of race relations, which is a huge issue in the United States at the time. Because there's still segregation happening in a lot of places in the United States. Plessy versus Ferguson, which said separate but equal was legal. That's all still in place. The military, while they allowed black people in the military, they were in segregated units. All right? And that's actually not even going to change until after World War II. There's still going to be segregated units. The issue here is that black people are not allowed into combat. There's all types of racist reasons for this. It's hard to justify racism, but the idea, there are ideas that black people, whatever race, undisciplined, wouldn't follow instructions, aren't smart enough, aren't skilled, whatever racist reasons it was. Now keep in mind, black people served in all the other militaries, like the French military, the English military. That wasn't a thing. So I don't know why America thinks again. What makes it even crazier is we are literally fighting a war against a man who talks about racial supremacy, and we're like, racial supremacy is bad. And then we say black people can't be in combat because they're an inferior, it's crazy. So it becomes a little obvious that America is full of crap here. So black people keep asking, can we serve in combat? And America's like, no. And then finally, because they keep asking, America's like, fine, once and for all, we are going to prove that black people can't be good soldiers and specifically can't be good fighter pilots, all right? So this whole thing of the Tuskegee experiments, which becomes extremely famous, is actually an experiment to try to prove that black people should not be allowed in combat because they're inferior for some reason, all right? Hopefully you know where this story is going because humans are not different from each other. So the first thing was America's like, I don't even know if black people would want to volunteer to be fighter pilots. And then thousands of people raise their hand and be like, I would like to be an African-American fighter pilot. And they're like, oh okay, well then, Sure. So they handpick a group of African Americans. Now these are going to be officers. Like, so this isn't just enlisted. These are officers. All right, from the Tuskegee Normal Industrial Institute, founded by Booker T. Washington. So these guys are going to come in and they are going to be fighter pilots. America agrees to this to prove when they fail to justify why they don't allow black people into combat. So there's thousands of people who volunteer for this, and they handpick a small group. So this is the Tuskegee Airmen. That, you know, some come and go throughout the war, so it's not like these aren't like the only Tuskegee Airmen that existed the entire war, but these are obviously like a team picture of the Tuskegee Airmen at one moment in time. So to prove that black people can't be good pilots, they handpick the very best from a group from thousands of entries. This way, when black people fail, people can't be like, oh, you didn't pick good ones, all right? Then they're going to give them the very best training. They're going to train them 3 times longer than the white counterparts. This way, when black people fail, you can't be like, oh, well, they weren't trained as well. Then they're going to give them the very best equipment. The P-51 Mustang fighter jets is the planes that the Tuskegee Airmen get. This way, when they fail, you can't be like, oh, well, you didn't give them the best equipment. Well, not surprisingly, looking at it in history, you handpick a group of people, you train them 3 times longer than anybody else, and you give them the best equipment. Are they going to be bad? No, they're going to be rock stars. And that's exactly what the Tuskegee Airmen did. They don't come out and are just successful. They are crazy dominant, all right? So much so. Now, I should also clarify, they wanted to prove that black people won't follow instructions, for whatever racist reasons that is. So they basically assigned them a job as fighter pilots, which white people don't follow the instructions. So that when black people will do the same thing white people do and not follow instructions, then they can say, oh, look what black people can't follow instructions, can't be fighter pilots. So they're literally setting them up for failure because fighter pilots hate the job they are assigned and they never do it when the job you're assigned is to protect these big, slow guys. These are like the air fortresses of World War II, these big, slow bombers, all right? So fighter jets like to go shoot down other bombers, as that's what they're supposed to do. Well, half the fighters have to defend your own bomber. Like in football terms, it's like the offensive line to defend the bombers at the time. So all the white pilots that will ever get assigned to defending these bombers, as soon as they see one fighter jet, they're all like battle, and they take off and they leave the bomber unattended, and the bomber gets shot down all the time. This is just what fighter pilots do. So by assigning the Tuskegee Airmen to defend these bombers, they think they can justify like to really point out how they won't follow instructions. The Tuskegee Airmen follow instructions, and they don't abandon these bombers. They become very famous, and I'll go back to this picture here. They're called the Red Tails, so that you can basically identify what squadron is what in the air. So they are referred to as the Red Tails, and they are to defend these bombers, because the bombers, you need them so they can go bomb stuff. So the Tuskegee Airmen are so good at defending these bombers. They are, not surprisingly, basically how I've built them up. They're the #1 group of fighter pilots when it comes to defending bombers in World War II. They're the only group at the end of World War II that did not lose a bomber the entire war, which is like an insane stat, all right? What's even more important in American society here is once America realizes, you know what? We might have been racist here. Like we could have just been horrifically wrong. Maybe black people can be effective fighters. As America's military comes to this realization, the Tuskegee Airmen, because they're so dominant, become kind of celebrities in the United States. The concept of them in the United States. The fact that by the end of the war, they start having propaganda posters with Tuskegee Airmen that says buy war bonds, which just like World War I, this is how World War II is being paid for, is basically you go invest in America's possibility of winning. That by supporting the war bonds, you're supporting black pilots. This is still segregation time. Black kids and white kids can't even go to school together here, but you still have black pilots on your propaganda because Everybody likes a winner, and the Tuskegee Airmen were a winner. And it really tore down a lot of racial barriers in the military because it was obvious that trying to justify why black people can't be pilots was completely ignorant and racially motivated. So the question here is, explain how the Tuskegee experiment results opened the door to American minorities in the military. So basically, how did that change the perspective of minorities in the military? So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. So once it becomes obvious that, you know, America's just racist, a lot of other groups get their first shot into active combat, and they all do fantastic because all the groups, this is the Buffalo Soldiers, the all-black battalions, is still segregated. The military is still segregated. Black people fight with black people, white people fight with white people, but black people are allowed to fight. The Buffalo Soldiers are hand-picked, trained longer, best equipment. Buffalo Soldiers do fantastic. The all-black 92nd Infantry becomes very famous for their fighting in Germany at the end of the war. Mexican Americans join in segregated battalions as well. And they had 17 Congressional Medals of Honor in their time in office, and with their combat experience in World War II. Because again, every group gets hand-selected and they do fantastic. Well, let's talk about the Japanese. Remember I had said there's a story about the invasion of Italy? We're going to come back to that in a second. The Japanese Americans are a whole unique story here. So when Japan attacked America at Pearl Harbor, there is a large population of Japanese Americans on the West Coast, like in California. There is a massive racist attack. Figuratively, I'm sure there were actual attacks, but of Japanese Americans, like blaming people that were born in America, that are American citizens, for this attack on Hawaii. And so much so that there becomes this fear that Japanese people are spies in America. I mean, it's wild. This really is hard for me to comprehend that this happened. Not that people are racist, but that the federal government, it's like, oh, people are angry at Japanese Americans saying they could be spies. They're like, yeah, we should round them all up and put them in camps. And FDR, this is FDR, the guy who puts black people in his cabinet that's progressive. He's like, you know what, I agree. And so they round up Japanese civilians, anybody of Japanese descent, not just some people that might be threats. Every Japanese person in America, they round them up and put them in internment camps. And I'll move out of the way here so you can see this picture at the bottom. These are internment camps that Japanese people have to stay in through the duration of World War II, so they're not spies. There is no evidence at all that they were ever any spies. But it actually goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upholds this, that it is legal to put an entire race of people in jail if you think they could be a threat. They lose their houses, their jobs. Like if they lost their house, the government takes their house, sells the house, and the government keeps the money. It's wild. It's wild. So if you're Japanese, if I was Japanese, all right, at the time, and this happened to me, I would not be a big fan of America. Well, apparently they're cooler than I am. There's a lot of people who get rounded up and put in these internment camps that want to serve in the military. America's like, no. You don't get to serve in the military because you might be a spy. Enough Japanese people wanted to join the military that they said, fine. But the only rule is they cannot fight in the Pacific, all right? They can only fight in Europe so they don't be spies. So Japanese soldiers had an entire separate battalion in World War II. They are called the Purple Heart Battalion. And it is insane. So what happens is when America goes into Italy, we don't know how strong Italy's army is going to be. So we send the Japanese American battalion in basically as like a human sacrifice to see how strong the Italian military is, so we can gauge, like it's literally just a sacrifice because they're Japanese, who cares? The Japanese actually defeat the Italian army, which is much smaller than expected. The craziest part about all that is, and tons of them were injured and shot, and they refused to leave because they realized that they had to basically prove to America that they cared about America, and they said the best way of showing our allegiance is to die in combat. Your family's been put in jail for their race. It's crazy to me. Anyway, so the Japanese Americans are going to march into Rome, the capital of Italy, and secure it for the Allies. So as they get ready to march into Rome, this is a picture of American soldiers marching into Rome. Can't really see from this picture. They're not Japanese. The Japanese soldiers are forbidden from stepping foot into Rome so that America, who's still back in North Africa, can send up white troops to walk through Rome so that the Roman people can see that, or the Italian people, that white people saved them and not Japanese. Like, that is some insult to injury. So even though there is some progression forward, there is still, racism is still a pivotal part of society and decision making at the time. So the question here is to explain why the Japanese Americans were only allowed to serve in the European theater and what happened when they got to Rome during Operation Torch. So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. All right, let's get to D-Day. So this was the plan B, couldn't make it over the Alps, so Operation Torch is over. We're going back, we're going to start this concept called Operation Overlord. The goal is to invade France, and we have to find a place that's not very well defended. Hitler has tons of troops here in France. We basically need to trick Hitler so that Hitler will move his troops away from where we want to land at. If we land right where all of Hitler's troops are, we're just going to get killed on the beaches and we'll never make it into France. If we can get into France, we think we can win the war. We got to get into France. So what we need to do is make Hitler think that we are invading a different place. So above me here, there at the top of this map, you see Dover, and then it's Calais, but it's pronounced Calais. So this is the closest area between the two sides. So we want Hitler to think we are going to invade from Dover into Calais. All right, so that Hitler will move all his troops up to Calais, leaving Normandy undefended. Here's how that's going to work out. It's a crazy story. Stay with me here. So this is our tank general, George Patton. George Patton helped defeat the Desert Fox there in North Africa. He's famous, hooray. He has a very extreme personality, but he's a winner, so everybody's cool with it. So Hitler's not afraid of anybody. Like, he's not, except for one person. And the person he's afraid of is this guy, George Patton. Why? I don't know. Everybody wants to kill Hitler, but for whatever reason, Hitler's afraid of George Patton. George Patton also finds out that Hitler's afraid of him, and it makes his ego huge. So that's the thing you need to keep in the back of your mind, that Hitler is really afraid of George Patton, the only person he's afraid of, and wants to know what George Patton is doing all the time. So during the North Africa campaign, there at the end of it, he likes to go by and give, like, if people were injured in battle or whatever, he likes to give the medals to him himself. He likes the image, the ego aspect of it. So he's walking by, and this is just an example of him giving a medal to a Buffalo soldier, that he walks by, goes into a medical tent to give out Purple Hearts personally. He walks up to an injured soldier who's just sitting on his bunk, and he doesn't seem to be shot or injured, and he's asked the nurse, is like, what's wrong with this guy? And she's like, well, he has, battle fatigue. Today we call it PTSD. We know it's a very severe thing. It was called shell shock after this. 1940s, there's not a lot of information on this, and it's not a well-respected severe issue, which it is. We know it is today. And Patton says, "You're not hurt, young man." And the guy's like, "I just can't do it." Like, you know, he's like in shock. So George Patton, instead of giving this guy a Purple Heart, slaps the guy. When he slaps the guy, this is horrible. The dude's, got cited, and the media was there because he obviously likes to have his picture taken doing this. So it's all over the media. Eisenhower, who is his boss, is like, "You got to be kidding me," and makes Patton apologize to this guy in front of everybody, because you can't slap a soldier because, you just can't slap a soldier. Patton responds at this apology by saying, "I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry we let sacks of crap like this guy in the military." Like, just doubles down, making the situation 10 times worse. So Eisenhower has to take disciplinary action here as they're preparing for this D-Day invasion. And he suspends Patton from action, knowing that Patton really wants to be on the front lines of this. And it really ticks him off. So what Patton's job is during this invasion is to be a decoy, because Hitler wants to know where Patton is. So they send Patton up to Dover, and they give him an entire army an entire tank army to make it look like he's preparing an invasion to invade from Dover into Calais. And Hitler takes the bait and pulls all his army up there. The problem is that's not where our army is going to invade at. We're going to invade down at Normandy. So what about all our equipment that we're using up here to trick Hitler? This is awesome. It's not real equipment. All these tanks that are out there that Hitler sees and thinks we're invading with, they're balloons. Oh, it's such a cool point. We make thousands of these balloon tanks. So from the air, when you spy on it, it looks like real tanks. All our other tanks are hidden and our other equipment. So on June 6th, 1944, not at Dover, but from all around America, England, and Canada invade at Normandy. The largest invasion in the history of the world. These are Americans coming across, and they had specially designed boats to come across these beaches at Normandy. They're called Higgins boats. We knew there would be some machine guns there. We were hoping the 101st Airborne would take them out. It doesn't happen. So these first waves of people were just getting mowed down by machine guns because you're just like having to run point blank at a machine gun. It's crazy. But by the end of the day, we were able to get our forces into France. We were able to secure France, or able to secure Normandy. And Hitler had been completely tricked with this fake situation that was happening otherwise. So the question here is, how was George Patton able to trick Adolf Hitler at the D-Day invasion at the start of Operation Overlord? So pause me, answer that completely. We're moving on. So, honestly, by this point, Russia had defeated Hitler at the Battle of Stalingrad. They're coming in from the east. The writing's on the wall. Once America gets in, we just start wrecking shop. So we have two generals, two generals, George Patton and Omar Bradley. When they get into France, they just start leapfrogging over each other, just wrecking shop through France. We secure Paris, and France is re-secured. It is obviously the writing is on the wall, but because our tanks just go in led by Patton and Bradley. Germany's worn out. They've been fighting for years. They're kind of running out of supplies. The war's going really good now. The biggest part was getting into France. This is a picture of American troops securing Paris and France. So France is now back to being able to control by France. And then the last ditch effort that Hitler throws at us is called the Battle of the Bulge. As the Allies try to step into Germany, the red area, he tries to fight back with his last bit, and it kind of pushes America back into Belgium. We're able to weather this storm. We win the Battle of the Bulge. From this point on, Hitler has nothing to really defend himself from the Allies that are coming in from one side, the Russians that are coming in from the other, and Adolf Hitler commits suicide here at the end of the war as America races to Berlin. Right here, as the war is pretty much over, FDR dies of natural causes as the president. He had just won his 4th consecutive term as president. He had gotten polio again. He got sick and he dies. His vice president, which I believe is his 4th vice president in 4 terms, is a guy named Harry Truman that takes over. So Harry Truman is actually the president when America invades Germany, secures Germany. It's called VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. Hooray, this nightmare is over. England and France are like, I'm so glad it's over. They slowly start limping home. And America starts looking around like, where are y'all going? Hey, war's not over. They're like, yes, it is. Hitler's dead. Everything, like the Nazi Empire has fallen. It's over. And we're like, it's not. So, and we'll talk about this tomorrow. We'll go back and talk about when the war ends in Europe, it does not end in the Pacific. The further we get closer to Japan in the Pacific to try to defeat Japan, they start using like kamikaze pilots, which we'll talk about tomorrow. Basically, soldiers that are willing to sacrifice themselves and kill themselves in this war. America starts freaking out. How do you defeat somebody who's already willing to kill themselves? The fighting on these islands in the Pacific is just vicious, and it is awful. And we need help. And everybody is slowly walking away. The only country that's still there kind of looking at us is Russia. And we look over at them, and Stalin's like, comrade. And America is going to have to ask for help from Russia here as soon as war ends in Europe, because we still have a whole nother war, and it's not going as well as it went in Europe. But we're going to talk about that start to finish tomorrow. So the question here is, even though the war is over in Europe, why is America still looking for military help in 1945? Basically, why are we looking for military help after VE Day? So that's what I got. Pause me, answer that completely. See you guys tomorrow.